No one in Harbor Ridge expected the quiet boat owner to cause the biggest HOA scandal the neighborhood had ever seen. And when the truth finally came out, even the HOA president wished she had never touched that boat, because this story wasn't just about a missing boat, it was about the moment someone powerful thought the rules didn't apply to them. And the quiet neighbor who proved they did, Daniel Carter, had lived in Harbor Ridge for nearly 8 years. The lakeside neighborhood was known for its calm streets, neat lawns, and strict HOA rules. Daniel followed those rules carefully. He kept his property clean, paid his HOA fees on time, and mostly kept to himself, but there was one thing Daniel loved more than anything. His boat, a sleek white fishing boat named Blue Horizon, parked safely at the small marina dock owned by the community. Daniel spent his weekends there, enjoying the peaceful lake and the quiet mornings that made Harbor Ridge feel like home. For years, no one had a problem with it, until Karen Whitmore became HOA president. Karen had moved into the neighborhood 2 years earlier, but the moment she became president, everything changed. Suddenly there were new rules, new warnings, and new notices taped to doors. Residents whispered that Karen enjoyed control more than community, but Daniel ignored the drama, that is. Until the morning he walked down to the dock and noticed something impossible. His boat was gone, the empty slip rocked gently in the water, the rope still tied to the post like someone had cut the boat loose and taken it away. At first Daniel thought it must be a mistake, but within minutes, a neighbor said something that made the entire situation even stranger. Someone had seen the HOA president towing a boat away the night before, and Daniel was about to find out exactly why. Daniel stood at the empty dock for several minutes, staring at the quiet water as if the boat might somehow reappear, but it didn't. The space where Blue Horizon had always rested now looked painfully empty. Daniel quickly walked back toward the marina office, his mind racing with questions. Harbor Ridge was a private community. Boats didn't simply disappear here, someone had taken it, and if the neighbor's story was true, that someone might be the HOA president herself. When Daniel reached the marina office, he asked the manager if there had been any notice about moving boats or dock maintenance. The manager shook his head. No scheduled work. Nothing at all. Daniel then asked the question he didn't want to ask. Did Karen Whitmore come by last night? The manager hesitated, then nodded slowly. She did. With a towing truck. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What did she say? She told us the boat violated a new HOA storage policy, the manager explained. She said it needed to be removed immediately. Daniel blinked in disbelief. There had been no notice. No warning. No letter, just one decision, and suddenly his boat was gone. Trying to stay calm, Daniel walked back home and opened his email. Sure enough, there it was, an HOA announcement sent late the previous night, a brand new rule about unauthorized boat storage. But Daniel noticed something strange. The rule had been written only hours before his boat disappeared. And even stranger, it wasn't approved by the HOA board yet. Karen had acted alone. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. Most people would have panicked, but Daniel simply smiled, because Karen Whitmore had just made a mistake she would never forget, and by the end of this situation, the entire neighborhood would know it. Daniel didn't rush to confront Karen. Instead, he spent the next morning doing something far more interesting. He started asking questions. First, he visited the marina manager again and politely asked if there were security cameras near the dock. There were. Within minutes, the footage confirmed exactly what Daniel needed to see. Late the previous evening, Karen Whitmore had arrived with a towing company. She spoke confidently, pointed toward Daniel's boat, and supervised while the crew pulled Blue Horizon onto a trailer. There was no emergency, no safety issue, just a quiet removal under Karen's instructions. Daniel thanked the manager and left with a copy of the footage. But he wasn't finished. Next, he reviewed the HOA bylaws, the same documents every resident received when moving into Harbor Ridge. Daniel read them carefully, line by line, and buried deep within the rules was something Karen had clearly ignored. The HOA president could not remove personal property without a board vote and written notice. Daniel had received neither, which meant Karen hadn't just bent the rules. She had broken them completely. That afternoon Daniel walked down Harbor Ridge's quiet street toward Karen's house. Her large front yard displayed a neat sign proudly announcing HOA president. Daniel knocked on the door. When Karen opened it, she looked confident and calm. Yes? Daniel smiled politely. I believe you have my boat. Karen crossed her arms. It violated the new HOA policy. Daniel tilted his head slightly. That policy wasn't approved. Karen's smile faded just a little. Well, it will be. Daniel simply nodded. Then he said something that changed the entire tone of the conversation. "That's interesting," he said quietly. "Because the police department might have a different opinion." And suddenly Karen didn't look quite as confident anymore. Karen Whitmore had spent months building her reputation as the most powerful voice in Harbor Ridge. Residents followed her rules, board members rarely questioned her decisions, and until that afternoon, no one had ever challenged her authority directly. But Daniel Carter wasn't raising his voice, he wasn't arguing, he was simply standing calmly on her front porch with a quiet confidence that made Karen uneasy. "You're overreacting," Karen said firmly. The boat was removed for violating HOA regulations. Daniel nodded slowly. "Interesting," he replied, then he showed her the printed page in his hand. It was a section of the HOA bylaws, the exact line explaining that personal property could only be removed after a full board vote and written warning to the owner. Karen stared at the page for a moment. "That rule will change soon," she said quickly. Daniel smiled again, but it hadn't changed yesterday. Karen didn't respond. For the first time since becoming HOA president, she looked uncertain. Daniel then calmly explained that removing someone's property without proper authorization could legally be considered theft under state law. Karen's confidence returned instantly. "You wouldn't call the police over a simple HOA matter?" Daniel slipped the printed page back into his folder. "I wouldn't," he said, then he looked directly at her. "But my insurance company already did." Karen blinked. "What?" Daniel explained that his boat was fully insured. And when he reported it missing earlier that morning, the insurance company began its own investigation, including a call to the local police department. Karen's face slowly lost color, because now this situation was no longer just about HOA rules, it had suddenly become something much bigger, and within hours, Harbor Ridge would be buzzing with rumors no one could ignore. News travels quickly in quiet neighborhoods. By late afternoon, several Harbor Ridge residents had noticed something unusual happening near the marina. 2 police vehicles were parked beside the dock office. People walking their dogs slowed down to watch. Neighbors stood on porches whispering to each other. No one knew the full story yet, but everyone knew it involved the HOA president. Daniel arrived shortly after the officers began speaking with the marina manager. He greeted them calmly and handed over the security footage. The video told a very clear story. Karen Whitmore had ordered the removal of Daniel's boat. No emergency, no board approval, no written notice, just her decision. The officers reviewed the footage carefully, then asked a few questions about the HOA policies Daniel had printed earlier. Within minutes it became obvious that something important had been overlooked. The HOA president had authority, but not unlimited authority. Removing personal property without legal approval crossed a serious line. As neighbors gathered quietly nearby, one officer made a short phone call to verify a few details. Daniel stood calmly beside the marina railing. He wasn't angry, he wasn't shouting, he simply watched the lake as if he were waiting for something inevitable to happen. Across the parking lot, Karen Whitmore's SUV suddenly appeared. She stepped out quickly, clearly aware that something unusual was happening. When she saw the police officers waiting near the dock office, her confident walk slowed. For the first time since the situation began, Karen looked nervous. The officer approached her politely and asked a simple question. "Ma'am, did you authorize the removal of a boat from this dock last night?" Karen opened her mouth to answer, but the crowd of neighbors watching nearby made the moment feel heavier than she expected, because whatever happened next, the entire community would remember it. Karen Whitmore took a deep breath before answering. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm the HOA president. The boat violated our storage rules." The officer nodded calmly. "Do you have documentation showing the board approved the removal?" Karen hesitated. The silence lasted only a second, but it felt much longer. "Well," she said carefully, "the rule was going to be approved." The officer exchanged a quick glance with his partner. Then he explained something that changed the atmosphere instantly. "Ma'am, according to the HOA bylaws we reviewed, personal property cannot be removed without a board vote and written notice to the owner." Karen's confidence faded again. "I was protecting the neighborhood," she insisted, but by now the small crowd of residents had grown larger. People whispered quietly as they watched. Some had received warning letters from Karen in the past, others had argued with her about small rule violations. Now they were seeing something unexpected, the HOA president being questioned about her own actions. The officer then explained that removing someone's property without authorization could lead to legal consequences. Karen looked stunned. "But it's just a boat." Daniel finally spoke for the first time since Karen arrived. "It's also private property." The officer nodded. Karen suddenly realized the situation had grown far beyond HOA politics, because once insurance investigators and police became involved, The rules changed. What started as a simple power move had now created a legal problem she hadn't anticipated, and as the conversation continued beside the lake, Karen slowly understood something difficult. Her decision the night before might cost her far more than she ever imagined. By sunset, Harper Ridge felt very different. Neighbors who normally kept to themselves had gathered along the marina path, quietly discussing the situation that had unfolded throughout the afternoon. The story spread quickly. The HOA president had ordered a resident's boat removed without approval. Police had investigated. Insurance investigators were now reviewing the case. And the entire neighborhood had witnessed the consequences. Karen Whitmore stood near the dock office looking far less confident than she had earlier that day. The officers explained that the matter would continue through legal and insurance channels, but one thing was already clear: the boat had to be returned immediately. And the towing costs would not be Daniel's responsibility. Within hours, the towing company delivered Blue Horizon back to its slip. As the boat settled gently against the dock again, Daniel stood quietly beside the water. He didn't celebrate, he didn't argue, he simply watched the lake the way he always had. For Daniel, the outcome wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness. Karen Whitmore soon resigned as HOA president after the incident became impossible to ignore. A new board election followed, and Harper Ridge slowly returned to the peaceful neighborhood it had once been. But residents would remember that day for a long time, because it reminded everyone of something important. Rules exist to protect the community, not to give power to the loudest voice, and sometimes the quietest neighbor is the one who understands the truth best, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.